There are some innovative new ideas in the budget which will be spoken of, but there are also some financial measures which will have a very negative impact on the stock markets in particular. I want to go across to Harsh Madhusudan Gupta first on the increase in the long-term capital gains tax from 10% to 12%. Adding to the short-term capital gains tax makes sense because you want to cut down on speculative activities. But when the idea has been to push investors into mutual funds, bring them into the markets, why would the government do something like this?
I think the government has also increased the exemption from 1 lakh to 1.25 lakhs. So I think it's a trade-off. I agree that it's an increase on patient capital. Nonetheless, 10 to 12.5% when the markets are booming.
But they won't be booming if you keep increasing taxes in this fashion. Punita Sinha is looking most disappointed. 2.5% of her returns in her portfolio just went out. You'll have to pay more to be...
But you see, I mean, this was what markets were worried about, right?
Yes.
That there would be this tinkering. Is that the reason why the markets are in the red at the moment?
Yeah, because I don't think anyone was talking about an increase in a long-term capital. I mean, there was speculation, but it wasn't something that was widely expected.
No, but this will...
Yeah, so
impact the mood terribly. Why would they do this? I'm trying to understand, Subhash.
Well, I think,
increasing, you've explained that speculative activities are going off. We need to clamp down on futures trading. There's too much gambling happening. That's understandable. This is long-term capital gains tax. You've got it stable at 10%. It's going okay. The markets are doing well. Investors are investing. Why give them this?
But I'll just say one thing. Globally, at least in the US, long-term capital gains tax rate is 20%. So India was far lower. So maybe there's some rationalization going on.
But if it isn't broke, why fix it?
That's the point.
Yeah, but the fact is, the fact is what you said in the morning, right? There were people who the government felt had benefited.
But that's not a long-term capital gains tax. Ek saal se zyada hold karna padta hai, sure.
Long-term capital gains tax, there are people who benefited hugely in the last few years. Why should they, at some level or the other, not pay a little bit more? Is the government's rationale?
And our income tax rates are higher than our capital gains tax.
So I think from the short-term perspective, market, how does it react? It might look to be a terrible move or non-politically correct move from the government's point of view. But if you look at the long-term health and the fair bit of taxation between the labor-earning people and those who earn from capital, I think both the measures, the options, derivatives, as well as raising the long-term capital gains is...
No, but Rajiv Kumar makes an important point. Why fix something which...
This is not fixing. This is fixing for long term. Let me also tell you that the 10% was introduced when I was in the system.
From zero.
And this was very widely criticized. This will also be criticized. But we should move, as Devina was also saying, towards a fair bit of taxation for the long term.
You need foreign capital to come and invest in your assets here. You need households savings to go into financial instruments.
Foreign investors don't pay
Most of the foreign investors don't pay capital gains
tax.
Why not?
All sovereign funds are exempt. All foreign funds...
No, but this is about all those who are watching India today at this time, whether they've got direct equity investments or they're investing through mutual funds or through alternate investment funds or through whatever tool they're using to invest, they'll have to pay more tax.
No, of course they will.
Yeah, but think about it. I mean, if you get money, put money in a fixed deposit, you pay the income tax rate.
Everywhere you pay.
You get capital gains, you're getting lower. So maybe now that the market is more mature,
interest you pay.
they can raise the levels and rationalize
Plus, she hasn't signaled direction. Is the idea to take it from 12.5 further to 15, 17.5 to 20? I mean, that's deeply problematic.
Why should they say it?
No, because it will have an impact on the mood in the markets.
You may interpret. But if the market interprets it this way, that maybe next year it will go to 15%, it will sell off more. But necessarily that's not a bad
But
direction.
presumably they did this because this was at a time when the markets have been buoyant pre-budget. What you said
they were maybe overheating. I mean, the logic would be that the markets are overheating.
This was the right time to do it. You wouldn't want to do it at a time when if you'd gone into the budget over a couple of months where the markets were depressed. You've gone into it where there's already been a pre-budget rally. So you can soften, just think about it in 2004. You remember the famous budget where the markets crashed and A.B. Bardhan, the CPI leader, said, "Bhaad mein jai markets," and everyone judged that budget from the market's perspective. I don't think it would be fair to judge it purely by whether the markets are in the red or not, given the short-term reaction. I think there was much more before.
No, sure.
I think the political aspects of it, for me, have stood out. This was not so much a union budget. At some time, for a while, it was a budget for Bihar and Andhra Pradesh. I mean, we are a country with 28 states, Rahul, and yet all the focus, when it came to specific allotments, is for 2 states of the country.
No,
I mean, what's the message there?
No, but
that
that's
the other
not
26
fair.
states
A lot
of
of the
this country
scheme,
don't
that
matter.
Purbodaya scheme was for all eastern states, not like they've
Come
conveniently
on.
clubbed Bihar and Andhra.
The
And of course, that's
specific
true.
allotments were very clear were for Bihar and for Andhra Pradesh. You speak about tourism, you focus on Bihar. You speak about infrastructure, you give specific allotments to Bihar. I mean, there are 28 states in this country.
I think it was only cleverly called Purbodaya.
Exactly.
But there is nothing for the poor, other poor
You're being unfair.
I'm being unfair by saying it was Bihar and
because
Andhra
the
Pradesh.
first and second priority of this budget and allocation were agriculture and employment and skill development. And a lot of money has been allocated there.
I'm just talking about state-wise.
This is a budget which is with its ears to the ground and not being in denial about those things. I think you should give credit to that.
So you give credit for the fact that they put employment on top, which is great.
Yes.
You give credit for the fact that they put rural infrastructure and agriculture on top, which is great.
On top.
But you should also raise questions, surely, that in a country of 28 states, 29 with Jammu and Kashmir, that only 2 states should figure for such a large part of the finance minister's speech. Is that, I mean, what does it say to the 26 other states of the country?
Clearly the political.
Why not accept that politically he had to reach out to JDU and TDP?
Correct.
If I may just add that some
political
of the
reality.
points
As you
mentioned,
kept saying,
the
political
money would be raised through
compulsions, right?
multilateral
What will the market
agencies.
do?
So it's not part of the fiscal
I can't
spend of the
say.
government. It will
I
be
can't
probably
say.
World Bank or Asian Development Bank loans. So to that extent, the political job is also done without hitting the fiscal aspect of it.
The strongest playing card you can have in politics is to be an ally to a government in minority. You know, you can pretty much swing the government and make them dance to your tunes. Bihar and Andhra Pradesh very clearly
I would not say it's
benefiting.
chancing. They said no to the special category. They said no to the special status.
that was impossible.
They've done it through a
Allocations.
back door, halfway there, halfway here.
No, but Bihar and Andhra have got, make no mistake, a much better deal than they would have otherwise.
Well, let's wait for the numbers. Let's wait for the
We will
numbers.
need to look at the numbers.
Yes,
Because the
exactly.
kind of package which has been announced, how would the money go for the capital project or for the Polavaram, for others? Is it being allocated? Only at some stage she said grants. But at other places, she didn't say either as loan or outside the budget or how. I think we'll need to look at
the details.
So they also mentioned using multilateral agencies. So they did say that, but you know, I thought that the specific allotments were for these 2 states in a manner.
It's not reflected in the fiscal deficit number.
Sure.
You have still 0.2%.
Which is again a strength of this government.
Exactly.
I mean, when you look at 4.9% fiscal deficit, the government will claim that they've got that completely, they've got their fiscal management completely at least on track.
In long term, this is with reference to what she announced as 4.5. But 4.5 itself is a very high fiscal deficit.
4.9.
No, now 4.9, but the goal of 4.5%
for FY26.
itself is a very large fiscal deficit. We are at, says 3%.
Yeah, 3.5, 3.
No, but
3%.
nobody so far even bothered about the financial...
No. In the first term, it's the same government.
Yes, but now they're making an effort to at least tend in that direction.
That is what
I
I'm
want to compliment
saying.
them for being
But
financially
let's also be
conservative and
fair,
not being
Mr. Garg,
reckless.
given the scale, I mean, one thing that the Modi government has tried to do is put its welfare schemes on scale. I mean, when you talk of 3 crore Awas Yojanas, they've tried in a way to saturate welfare schemes. So naturally there will be some pressure. They've had headroom because of the RBI dividend. The question that I have is, at the end of the day, do you see this as a budget with political messaging or a budget that has set us on the roadmap for the next 5 years or 25 years, as the Prime Minister said? I saw nothing, Rahul, with due regard to suggest what our roadmap for the next 5 or 25 years is.
Let's take the 2 big ideas. I want Subhash Garg to come in on the employment-linked incentives. The Congress is saying, "Ye to hamara idea tha." The BJP is saying, "We've brought it, so obviously it's our idea." But the big question is, by giving these incentives to employees and employers, will it actually foster job creation in your view?
So the emphasis on employment and job creation is fabulous.
Yes.
It has to be there, it must be there. But when you go into the contents of it, I think we will need to go more. My sense, the way I read, is that a lot of it is still in the form of giving some PF kind of contributions, which are there for last 7 years. We have ABRY, before that we another scheme which was doing for last 7 years. So is there a new way?
No, but do they work?
So
does a financial incentive for job creation work in this fashion?
may not actually work. It adds to the new EPFO numbers, etc., which we see quite often. How would the new internship scheme would add?
No, so I'll come to internships in just a moment. Rajiv Kumar.
A friend of mine just sent me a message saying that I think one of the schemes that they've got for employment link is based on the fact that your first job gets you 1 lakh and more. Now, many of them are arguing, where am I going to...
Up to 1 lakh.
Up to 1 lakh and more?
1 lakh and more. Up to 1 lakh. It is up to jobs that pay 1 lakh.
Up to 1 lakh.
Yes.
Now, the question is that how many jobs eventually will actually benefit from this? How many employers will actually take advantage of this ELI scheme?
That is very important. Does something substitute? Or it's actually a new job?
But even if it substitutes, at least those jobs are now in the formal market.
One goes out,
protections.
another comes in.
No, but the biggest question, Harsh, is will this limited incentive encourage any employer to add to the number of people he employs because of this incentive
To add to Mr. Garg's points, it is possible that instead of informal jobs on the margin, that job might now become a classified formal sector job.
To claim the incentive.
Yeah, but then that helps the employee to get some kind of protections in terms of hiring and firing, some pensions, some at least 2-3 months of cooling off period if they have to,
then the employer will compare the advantages of getting this incentive versus the disadvantage of having this guy formally on his rolls.
Exactly. So it moves
Rajiv, why do you think it will work? Because that's one of the big ideas, the employment-linked incentive. It sounds phenomenal in theory. Does it, in your view, could it work in practice?
No, I think it will work in practice. Because the employer for the first time will have the incentive not to hire contract labor, but to hire formal labor on its rolls. I think that's a very big idea. And therefore, and also the internship, thing, the 3,000 rupees that the government is paying on the internship, I think is again a very good idea because, it will encourage employers.
What kind of internship? So somebody comes and interns with any company, they'll get this internship allowance?
They said 500 companies. And it'll, that...
CPSEs.
Sorry?
500 CPSEs.
So only for public sector enterprises?
Amongst them, at least 500 CPSEs.
Also the others.
No, how will this work? Just try and explain from what you've understood. How will this internship scheme?
Rajiv, so it's only the first pay you government is giving. So employer has to think about...
it's still 4 years.
I thought it's first year.
The first year.
It's the first year.
First timer.
First timer, first year.
First timer, they will pay
month of the first year.
No, first year.
First timer, first year.
Ek time ke liye karoge to nobody will do it.
So in a sense, I think that's the biggest, I think that's what the government will claim is the biggest takeaway, that they've recognized that there is a jobs challenge.
That's right.
They've recognized that they need to do something for those who have, for both companies as well as the youth who have been banging at the doors, especially young, at election time as well, that Rozgar is a major concern. Whether this is a game changer, I think is a huge question mark. How employers, I know Mr. Rajiv Kumar is saying employers will be tempted to formalize labor. I'm not so sure that, I think we're going to have to see whether that actually works
on
the ground.
What's very clear is that the government is acknowledging that job creation is an essential challenge, and they've thrown something at it.
Absolutely.
They've thrown some ammunition at it.
Absolutely.
The efficacy with which this works is something that really needs to be determined. But it's a big idea that's been thrown up. Harsh, the Congress will say, and many Congress leaders who are messaging at this time, boss, this was our idea, you're copying from our manifesto.
There is no harm in getting good ideas from the Congress or from Germany. The point is who gets to implement it and implement it.
You're saying the Congress got the idea from Germany.
So there is no harm in, even if it's a Congress idea, except talking point, I don't see any downside to it.
And just as a humorous
Congress come up with more
just
ideas.
As a humorous aside, and to show how politics works, actually when you looked at an earlier Congress manifesto, many of the farm laws that the Narendra Modi government brought were in that Congress manifesto. And the Congress then went and opposed those ideas because they were in the opposition. So where you stand in Indian politics depends on where you sit. I think it's good if the government takes something which the opposition has put out, which has caught the imagination. The Congress called it a right to apprenticeship. The government is calling it an internship. But it's essentially the same broad idea that's coming forward.
But can you explain, Subhash Garg, what you've understood of how this internship scheme will work?
So internships, now think about it from the employer's perspective. I hope it doesn't become another Narega. You get money, but you don't really get trained.
Is internship only for government companies or is it for private companies as well?
Yeah.
Is internship only for
private companies?
For private as well as CPS.
Nobody has time for interns.
For example, somebody interns with the India Today group, the government will give an internship allowance for that.
That's correct.
For all companies.
You can be rest assured the way government schemes work, there will be some criterion. It won't be easy to just get 3,000 rupees.
Correct.
Mr. Garg can explain that better. So
He's the one who puts the devil in the details.
It won't be
how
like
is this likely to work?
No, we will have to see. Internship is a different concept than apprenticeship.
The two different things.
Apprenticeship, you are learning some skill. Internship, you are studying somewhere and then you are doing some kind of work with someone, which is
Isn't
not correct.
apprenticeship more logical than internship?
No, both are logical.
Both are required.
Internship is a very well recognized mode of doing some getting work experience.
Actually, the distinction between the two is very blurred. Because internship and apprenticeship are pretty much the same thing. Because you are doing.
No, you're not
Let's get
graduating.
in Sunil Munjal to find out how employers are looking at
Employment-linked
incentives. Sunil Munjal, good to have you on the show. Your first reaction to the budget, specifically, if we may start, because we've been debating it, this big idea of an employment-linked incentive scheme. Will it be bought by employers, or will employers want to study the detail before going ahead?
No, for anything, you obviously want to study the details about what all of the implications are before anything gets implemented, and that's a natural ask. But overall, I thought the budget was more like a statement of intent of 5 years rather than just a one-year budget. She covered such a wide spectrum. There was a smattering of things right across, right from girls, women, agriculture, startups. There was almost no area left untouched. A lot of it, however, said that we will do a study over the next 6 months. We will come back with more details. A lot of it also was encouraging multilateral agencies to get involved, whether with states or with small industry, etc. They did, however, back that up by saying that the government will provide the guarantees for those. I thought that was a good
Munjal, let's look at some specific. That's a broad stroke reaction. The big idea Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has laid is that there will be employment-linked incentives, not just for you as an employer, but take, for example, other companies, also some MSMEs. From the mindset of an employer, do you think that some of the semi-formal, informal jobs which were off the payrolls then get regularized because for 4 years the government offers an incentive to those who are then brought on the payroll? To what extent do you think this will boost formal job creation?
I think in isolation, these things work, but not super effectively. But I think clubbed with the multiple other things that she mentioned, I think it can work. So please remember, at this moment, one of the things that we are constantly talking about is the feeling of joblessness. It's not as if there is actual joblessness, by the way. The feeling that we are not creating enough jobs is a serious problem. And inflation, of course, does not help at all at the same time. So by doing 2 or 3 things, one is controlling the fiscal deficit to where she has, and announcing a lower one next year, it's a clear indication of what the government finances are likely to look like. Therefore, the impact on the overall economy. Now, having said that, if you are encouraging companies to grow by the 4 or 5 things that she mentioned, then clubbed alongside that, to take in interns is actually a good idea. To take in new employees under making them formal, I think is a good idea. Will it work across the board? It's hard to say today, because as you just said, we have yet to see the fine print. But overall, this is something that as industry we have been asking for. We said on the one hand, you have production linked incentive. You also need to encourage employment, especially in sectors that have high employment potential. Whether you look at textiles or you look at sectors which had suffered in the economy overall, also needed some attention.
Mr. Munjal,
is an internship effectively a short-term employment, essentially? So you're not suggesting beyond that 1 year that you're guaranteeing them some kind of employment. You're just giving them a leg up at the start.
It's on a spectrum between skilling and full-time
So
employment.
it's more the messaging that you're giving, that you're conscious of the fact that there is a job problem and you're trying to reach out and convince both employers as well as the
also
you're trying to do something.
On-the-job skilling also happens.
The job skilling is a separate scheme that they've announced that they're
And
going
the
to.
other one, where you
do
pay 1 year salary, is a job creation scheme.
Okay. One of the country's senior financial sector executives, Sanjay Nair, joins us, founder, chairman, Sovereign Investment Fund, has run different kinds of banks. Sanjay, welcome. I want to start by asking you about the increase in the long-term capital gains tax. The market's obviously initially reacting quite negatively to that. Do you think there was logic to why this has been increased from 10 to 12.5? Or as Rajiv Kumar said earlier, it's like trying to fix something that aren't broken.
That's true. You can look at it that way. But
Exuberance
also,
is not broke.
Long-term capital gains. We should make sure it's not the driver of the markets. I mean, we are not. It's not like we're an expensive LTCG among the other global countries. So I don't think it's a big deal to increase by 2.5 points. If the underlying growth is there and the way the PE multiples are, I don't think it should be. It should have a long-term impact on the markets.
Also, angel tax finally being abolished was a bad idea to begin with. The government acknowledging that, quite belatedly. What kind of an impact? Because you're investing a lot in private equity, you're investing a lot in startups. So your sense of the impact that abolition will have?
Sorry, I missed that question again.
I'm saying angel tax being done away with, your assessment of the impact this will have on the startup sector.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a positive one. That's really positive. These are small irritants that had actually escaped, not attention, but attention to really get done. Like this ESOPs for foreign expats working in the country. This movable assets being depenalized for less than 20 lakhs. Angel tax. I mean, these just had to go, and I think I'm very happy that those have been addressed, howsoever small. But they're irritants, and it just creates a climate that it's tough for startups to get things done and to have the right shareholder agreements, to have the right kind of fundraising at the right fair market value. So I think that's a real welcome change.
Munjal, a lot was said that we should signal that we are moving away from protectionism, that tariffs should be brought down. It's been done in some sectors. Mobiles, it's been done for minerals, it's been done for gold, silver. Do you think adequate signaling has been done about wanting to embrace international trade, or do you think more should have been done?
I think there's a second part of the signal. One is that we are moving towards open trade. Second is we have been selected with saying these are things that matter to us, which incidentally is the approach every country in the world today is taking. The old move towards globalization and everyone depending on each other clearly has taken a hard knock over the last 5 years. Every country is pulling back. So we are saying a signal. We want to continue, but we want to continue selectively. Could we have done more? Probably, yes.
I think this move to abolish angel tax is the best one.
What impact will it have on the startup sector?
The government has learned very hard way. You remember last year budget, they actually increased or brought the foreign investors into the ambit of the angel tax.
Sir, ये बुरे idea लेके आते हैं bureaucrats.
Correct. No, they brought last year. So I don't know
who. They keep tinkering and tweaking.
I don't know who brought this time, but that's the most sensible.
No, but it's going away. So
yes.
But I'm saying, look at because the big message is there is continuity in policy making, right? If last year you're increasing a tax, suddenly you're abolishing it, then where is the continuity, Harsh Gupta, you're talking about?
They learned it very hard.
Sometimes when you make a mistake, it doesn't, no point being continuously
on
making
this you're making mistakes.
It's good to actually remove the tax.
8 years.
I just want to bring the
big
discussion back to the bond market, not just the equity market. The bond market obviously likes the fact that instead of 5.1% on the interim budget fiscal deficit, we have a 4.9%.
Correct.
Remember, this is despite coalition political pressures. This is despite the fact that obviously Andhra and Bihar wanted
and this is when India is joining a lot of the international bond indices.
Exactly.
Whether it's the Bloomberg.
In fact, the RBI has now been sterilizing foreign inflows.
Yeah, but
last week
this is also due to RBI doubling its contribution.
Yes, but that is as per a framework.
Doubling from the target.
It is not a discretionary contribution. It is as per an economic capital framework that RBI and the government of India have agreed.
I know, but the point is that the RBI made all that money because of foreign exchange valuations, etc., etc. All of that, but the fact remains that they doubled the contribution from the target.
In the
so therefore, it's
I'm saying in the renewed political context, the government could have stuck with 5.1%, like it stuck with its capital expenditure plan.
That's great going.
The fact that 20 basis points were shaved off is a strong message to the bond market that there will be less supply of paper. As Rahul was saying, you're now in the bond indices. So that will increasingly bring down the cost of capital.
And some shift from equity markets to bond markets.
I don't think it's a big
change
move,
in tax regime.
but it's a good signaling.
It's a great signaling, and I think kudos.
Psychologically less than 5 also, right?
No, and signal also to investors to consider, pairing their stock market assets and investing more in on the debt side.
Exactly.
What is, when you say signaling, what for you, if there was is there a steady narrative that this government has built? Is there something that comes out of this budget that suggests, when I heard Sunil Munjal saying we've got a direction for the next 5 years, she did outline 8 priorities of the government. but they were, apple pie like priorities, infrastructure, women. Is that a roadmap that you see? Was there, apart from employment, is there a focus area that you see that has been built for the next 5 years, as the Prime Minister promised that this budget?
Before I come to that,
Yes.
on the bond side, the fact is that foreigners' investment in our bonds is still less than what it was in 1920, despite the bond index being. So why they were not investing? Why they were not buying Indian bonds? I think that signaling effect that you have a very high fiscal deficit, you have very low credit rating, was playing.
Yeah, but the big message. What is the big message?
I think the big message is continuity. The fact that Modi 3.0 is more like Modi 2.0 when it comes to Modinomics. So more stability, more capex, and now time for the privatization.
Yes, Puneet.
Okay, so, as everybody used to say, pehle, roti, kapda, or makan. This time the budget to me signals naukri, sadak, or makan. Because a lot of emphasis on roads, infrastructure, a lot of emphasis on jobs, and then, of course, land records, housing, all
So
of
let's
that.
ask Sanjay Nair this question. The effort that's been made to try and spur job creation, what impact, Mr. Nair, do you think this is likely to have? The signaling is good, the government using some of its financial gunpowder to try and encourage job creation. In the end, from what we know in the public domain, do you think it's likely to work?
Yeah, I think so. I think, look, I was just listening to all of you. I think the big message here is that you've got a pretty balanced budget in a way, and you've reduced the fiscal deficit, as someone mentioned, and I don't know who that was, that we didn't have to shave off the 20 basis points, but I think it will give a lot of confidence to both foreign and local bond investors, and really adds to this stability. I think the big message is there is no easy consumption SOP. I thought they might do that a little bit, but even that is not there. They've taken the long, arduous way, which is simplifying things, youth skilling, credit guarantee schemes more for the MSMEs, more of this, employer and employee benefits for more employment. They've taken the longer route of job creation, MSMEs for local manufacturing, and also making sure that they've tinkered with custom duties to make sure that you have a lot more local manufacturing. So really it's going towards, I think someone just gave a very good thing. It's about creating naukri, and then that should lead to much more disposable income and consumption. So frankly, this is a long, arduous route taken. If it works, which all depends on execution between the center and states, I think you have far more sustainable consumption looking ahead, and then hopefully capex picks up. So I think that, according to me, is the big message here. And look, fiscal consolidation is welcome, frankly. Yeah.
But and Rajiv Kumar, since you were with Niti Aayog, you can tell us, among the successes of the Modi government in the early years, one of the failures was seen as skill development. You had a Ministry of Skill Development. A lot of talk was on skilling, but very little happened actually, many believe, on the ground when it came to skill development. Even the minister was eventually changed. Is that now, you can't just do employment-linked scheme without really focusing on skilling. Is that going to have to become a big challenge for this government? The fact is that it's all very well to talk about skilling, but you're going to have to make sure that it actually translates into real skilling on the ground.
But Rajdeep, I think it's to the credit of the government that they haven't given up on skilling effort. Because some people could have said, well, that was a bad idea, let's give it up. In this budget, the finance minister has announced further allocations and a loan for those who are doing it into skilling. There are several schemes, I think 3 or 4 schemes that they've been outlined. Yes. So I think this continued focus on skilling is a recognition that today our youth is not employable. And they have to be made employable as fast as possible.
That's a long-term challenge, though. It's not a short-term challenge, and there are no short-term fixes.
But has to start now, and that's what the government has done.
One subtle shift is that instead of skilling people outside of jobs and then giving them jobs, there is a focus on trying to skill them on the job through apprenticeships, internships, and I think that is the best kind of long-term skilling, because it does not get theoretical and academic then.
But there's also a philosophical message here, which is in keeping with the way the Prime Minister views his economics. He doesn't like easy handouts. So the idea that you, for example, the idea was that you increase the Kisan Nidhi from 6,000 to 8,000, or you do some kind of an urban Manrega. He's eschewed such ideas. So there's no easy handout, which is typically what the opposition may have thought they would have wanted to do, or they may have wanted to do, or the kind that we're seeing in Karnataka, etc. There's no easy handout.
It's workfare, not
it's
welfare.
structural.
Workfare, not welfare.
They're trying to make structural changes. For example, if there is more, and that I think is something which really needs to be applauded. We can criticize the increase in long-term capital gains for the equity markets. That's just really, one aspect.
The markets have recovered largely.
The larger aspect, though, is that they're trying to fix the structure, the nuts and bolts of the economy.
Yeah. The only thing I worry about, as I said earlier, is I hope this internship program is well executed, because otherwise it risks becoming like an NREGA. Because there'll be people just sitting in the companies with
Claiming
nobody to train
internships.
them and collecting money and doing no work.
But Sunita, the thing here is that companies don't like people sitting idly inside their premises.
No, but they may not come to the premises, they may stay at home. How do you ensure that
that is always the situation, even in skill development.
No, it happened in the US. Remember, when employment incentives were given on the back of the pandemic, there were a lot of reportage in the United States media where individuals were claiming this in cahoots with the companies without actually any work happening. And if it happened to that extent in the US, in India, jugaad can go to another level.
And then work from home, how do you, and who's going to train these people if the manager is working from home?
Rahul, when we traveled in India during the elections, when you spoke to people about the Rozgar challenge, the point that Rajiv Kumar made, and I think is reflected in the budget, is not just about employment, it's employability. And I think that is a challenge which is a long-term challenge. It's not going to be fixed by one budget or what the intent is well. My worry with all of this, the intent is in the right direction. The reality on the ground is very different. And unless I see...
but so far, I think there's no answer to the question.
Much higher allotments for education. You want to see not just in skilling, but you want education to be prioritized far more than has happened in the last 10 years, or dare I say, some will say over the last 75 years. Unless you're going to dramatically change that, Rahul, it's not just physical infrastructure. You're going to have to focus far more on social infrastructure.
On education, for example, look what happened in Uttar Pradesh, right? Government school teacher unions are refusing to digitally enter and exit the school based on records. So there's no point just throwing more money as outlays without getting the outcomes. So it's not just announcing in the budget without getting
But
those...
as I said, it didn't happen with the first tenure of Mr. Modi when skill development was seen as a major focus. It didn't take off.
Which is why I think on-the-job training actually is a very sensible and pragmatic way to do it, as opposed to showing a headline allocation to education which goes through teacher unions. They are not coming to schools.
I would have been happier because there are actually acts governing the apprenticeship. Is that if there are much greater allocation to apprenticeship under that name, because that would be a much better way to, sort of balance the demand and supply.
But I think it's been called internship because if it was called apprenticeship, there would have been too much credit fight between the Congress and the people.
That doesn't matter, yeah. But
आपको नहीं matter करता, जो election लड़के आए उसको matter करता है.
From Aadhaar downwards, this government has been pragmatic.
But Aadhaar existed. You can't now bring an apprenticeship
pragmatic enough to take other people's ideas.
You can change the name and
we should study the German model.